All right, let's check in now with our guy, Nick Hennion, who joins us each and every Tuesday here on Send It In. Give Nick a follow on X at Nick Hennion, BetMGM senior writer. Nick, great to be back with you, my friend. Hope you had a nice trip across the pond out there in London. And you're just in time for the Wyndham Championship, the final leg before the FedEx Cup playoffs. What can you tell us about the Wyndham Championship? What's the handicapped kind of golfers that you're looking for this week?
Yeah, hey PJ, good to be back in good old US of A. Wyndham Championship is actually a pretty easy handicap. You need to hit it in the fairway, you need to hit your irons well, and you need to make a lot of putts. Easy enough, right? But what really stands out about this course is there's very penal rough as well. So you're going to want to separate the accuracy over the distance players off the tee. So your guys like Jake Knapp, maybe where you played him last week, you're not going to look at him this week. That's why you've seen guys like Aaron Rye, Lucas Glover win at Sedgefield Country Club. Another thing that I looked at in my handicap, and I'll mention that bettors can find my full model over on the BetMGM blog, is there's a decent correlation between this course and how guys have performed at Detroit Golf Club. If you look at the last four of the last five winners here, also played in Detroit in the lead up to the event. All four of those finished T11th or better in their start at Detroit. It's another Donald Ross design. There's a lot of similarities around the green, so be sure to look out for that when you're making your bets this week.
I like that. Yeah, we're always looking for comp courses. That's a good one to keep out. Same architect, like you said, with Donald Ross. So keep an eye on that. Nick, you're going to hear a lot of people are going to hear a lot this week leading up to the event on Thursday. This is the final regular season event. So guys are trying to make that top 70 to advance to the playoffs next week in Memphis. Do you buy into that at all? Like, was that part of your handicap that guys that are maybe in that 77, 81 range that need a good week, maybe a little extra motivation? Do you take into account that at all when handicapping this week?
I really don't. I kind of equate it to NFL Week 18, where if you're in that position where you need to have a strong week to make the playoffs, there's pretty much a reason for that. So I don't really buy those guys unless you're getting a really good price to do so, which when I was looking at the board this week, it didn't seem like there was a lot to, there was a lot of motivation where you find a guy like 150 to 1 where a strong performance gets him into the playoffs. So it didn't come across in my handicapping. The one thing I did consider, and this is a little hint as far as the first guy on my card, Ryder Cup motivation is something I definitely looked at. You have a couple of U.S. guys playing this week where I think there's some motivation to make the team and try to get one of the last few automatic qualifier spots. So definitely consider that in the handicap, but not anything as far as the playoffs go.
I like that. I like the Ryder Cup angle. All right, Nick, who are some of the golfers that you like this week out at Sedgefield Country Club? Who made your card?
Yeah, two guys under 45 and then a couple of long shots for you later. But we'll start with Ben Griffin at 25 to 1, already a winner on tour this year. And if you look at the first 10 guys on the odds board, he's really one of the only guys who has a really great course history here. Played here in 2022, finished in a tie for fourth. Played here in 2024, finished in a tie for seventh. And I think you're getting a really good price on a player who is fourth in strokes gained approach over his last 24 rounds over the same time frame, first in bogey avoidance, and he's fifth in eagles gained. Sneakily, the two par fives here at Sedgefield both have an eagle or better rate of 4% or higher, which doesn't sound like a lot, but compared to some other par fives, quite a lot. So I think you look at Ben Griffin, he's ninth in the Ryder Cup standings right now. I think I haven't done the math on if a win gets him into the automatic qualifier spots, but it can only help his case for Captain Keegan Bradley to pick him if he plays well. And then I will go with Lucas Glover at 40 to 1. I mentioned he's a past winner here at Sedgefield, won here 2 years ago. He's kind of that fits that mold where he's really good off the tee. He's not a big hitter, but he's very accurate when it comes to his iron play off the tee. He's arriving at Sedgefield with 3 straight top 25 finishes before he crossed the pond for the Open. Tied for ninth at the Travelers, tied for fifth at the John Deere. So didn't play the Rocket Classic, like I mentioned, but he did also finish on the podium at TPC Sawgrass, which, according to Data Golf, is the number one correlated course to Sedgefield Country Club. So if you look at him decent off the tee, really good iron play recently. And I think if you just find a hot putter with him this week, I think you could see him get a second win at Sedgefield.
All right, very good. Ben Griffin, Lucas Glover, a couple guys to keep an eye on. What about some long shots this week, Nick? Somebody down the board that maybe entices you.
Yeah, these are always the fun ones, right? Kevin Roy at 100-1 is going to lead off the two long shots I have. He lost 3.4 strokes on approach last week at the 3M, and he is still second in strokes gained approach over his last 24 qualifying rounds. He really had a strong finish at the 3M because of the flat stick. Gained 7.3 strokes putting over at TPC Twin Cities. Is that replicable week over week? I don't think so. But this is a guy who has gained strokes putting in 5 of his last 6 events. The only one where he lost strokes putting was at the Rocket Classic. Kind of a little bit of a concern, but when you're giving me 100-1 on a guy who finished tied for 8th at Detroit Golf Club, another Donald Ross design, I'm willing to take a bite of the apple there. And then I'm going to join golf betting Twitter and be on Nico Echeverria at 100-1. All the signs are there. He was a top 10 finish at Detroit Golf Club. He was runner-up at the Sony Open at the earlier this year. He lost in a playoff. If you go all the way back to late last year, runner-up at the RSM Classic down in Sea Island, Georgia. Those are all short positional courses where you don't have to hit it a long way off the tee, and he can just rely on his irons to have a really strong ball striking performance. Echeverria, over his last 24 rounds, 7th in the field in strokes gained total on courses under 7,200 yards. He also leads the field in strokes gained putting on Bermuda grass over his last 24 rounds. So Nico Echeverria, I know I'm not the first person to give that out. I probably won't be the last, but 100-1, it's good enough for me.
All right. I like that, Nick. We getting a question here from somebody watching the show. First time caller to 708 wants to know any make or miss cut bets. I don't know if you bet into that market yet. You mentioned a lot of the guys towards the top of the leaderboard. Not great course history here. You do like Ben Griffin. Was there maybe a name towards the top of the board that you think could miss the cut this week that might be worth a bet?
Nothing I researched. It wasn't anything that came up for me as far as who's going to make the cut. Jake Knapp, off the top of my head, this is not fully researched, so take it with a grain of salt, but Jake Knapp, it is kind of a good sell high position on him coming off a near win at the 3M Open, but I think this course doesn't really benefit him the same way that TPC Twin City does. Again, I mentioned you really need to be accurate off the tee. That said, he did play well at Detroit Golf Club, but for as much as I mentioned the correlation with Detroit and Sedgefield, it's very different off the tee. So if I had to give you somebody towards the top of the board, I would say someone like Jake Knapp, just because his price has gotten a little bit inflated, but that's the best I can give you.
Now, you know what? It's funny. When I saw that question too, Knapp was the first name that popped into my mind. For everything that you said, I like Knapp on these longer courses where he can use his length. These shorter courses, I think he would be somebody that I would look to fade this week. Nick, let's talk some NFL before we let you go. Yesterday, we wrapped up our NFC previews. We've talked about all those teams. It's an interesting conference this year, right? Certainly the Eagles are the team to beat, winning the Super Bowl, but you could really make a case for a lot of different teams, the Packers, the Lions, the Bears people like, the Commanders. Who in the NFC at this point would you pick to win that conference and be the representative in the Super Bowl?
I like Green Bay quite a bit. I think there's a little bit of concern that they could see some negative regression defensively. But if you look at the way their schedule breaks down, what I like about it is all their most difficult games come at home. I'd have to go back and look and see if there's any any variance in the splits as far as how they perform defensively on the at home versus on the road. But I really think that Jeff Halfley has a good scheme. There's a bunch of untapped potential in that offense. And I think Jordan Love kind of gets a bad rap for his quarterbacking play based on the mistakes of his wide receivers. And look, I get there's a bunch of concern with the fact that Green Bay, they don't have a wide receiver one. That's their big flaw. But is there a path to the NFC title where they just rely on one of the best offensive lines in the entire league and run Josh Jacobs into the ground? I think yes. I think that problem is easily solvable. I think there's regression coming for both Detroit and Minnesota. And, there's so much hype around Chicago that everyone, I think, has forgotten about Green Bay. And I think you could see them represent the NFC at the Super Bowl this year.
I like it. And then, Nick, before I let you go, we were talking about the Texans today. They're looking for their third straight AFC South title. You had told me, though, before the show, you are not on the Texans this year. So what is it about the Texans that has you fading them this year?
Yeah, sorry, PJ, to disappoint. This is the first time PJ and I are disagreeing, so this is going to be a surprise. But there's so much regression coming for this team defensively. Like, look, I get their front seven might be the best in the NFL. I am not going to dispute the talent that's on the defense and the fact that D'Amico Ryans is a very good head coach. But they were third in defensive DVOA last year against the 22nd hardest schedule of opposing offenses. If you look at their schedule this year, they are scheduled to face the eighth hardest set of opposing offenses based on 2024 DVOA ratings. Now, that also includes teams like Denver, who I expect to be better offensively, Vegas, 2 games against Tennessee. They can only be better with Cam Ward at quarterback than Will Levis. So they play 8 games this year against teams that were 11th or better in offensive DVOA last year. Last year, they played only 6 games against teams that were 10th or better in offensive DVOA. They were 1-5 in those games. The only game they won was at home against the Bills off a Sunday night football game against the Ravens. Oh, and by the way, they didn't have Khalil Shakir playing in that game. So that was a 3-point win. They were incredibly lucky in the division. I think 4 of their 5 wins came by like 4 or fewer points, something ridiculous. The offensive line might be the worst in the entire league. If you're telling me they can't run the ball and it's going to be 3rd and long for CJ Stroud behind an offensive line that can't protect him, I will take that bet. Like, I will pay to see him ball out and just prove me wrong. Can he do it? Maybe, but I'm on under 9.5 wins. I took a small piece of Jacksonville to win the division, but I think there's no surprise coming out of that division besides, for me, Houston winning it for a 3rd year in a row.
All right, very good. Making a good case. Nick Hennion, give him a follow on X at Nick Hennion, BetMGM senior writer. Nick, always appreciate the time and insight, my friend. We'll talk to you again next week.
You bet. Thanks, PJ.